What you're about to hear could be disturbing.
We can eliminate an entire district court.
So how important are the upcoming midterms? Well, in 18 months, all 435 members of the House and 34 U.S. senators will have to face the music. And the question is, will that music be Copeland's fanfare for the common man or Kid Rock's greatest hits?
Wear your mask, take your pills. Now a whole generation's mentally ill.
How important is it that Democrats at least put their foot inside the door and stop this takeover of our democracy by Pouty Funkwinkle and these good little Christian boys? Well, pretty important, because, baby, that's what's happening.
It's not what the founders intended. So there's a natural tension between the branches of the government, and we're working through that. The Judiciary Committee is looking at alternatives. One of the bills that I really like that's already been through committee was authored by Representative Darrell Issa, and that would limit the scope of federal injunctions, the ability of one individual judge to abuse the system in this way. And it would be, in my view, a dramatic improvement on that. So we'll be moving, I think, that piece of legislation and some others to address it, because we have an Article I authority under the Constitution to do that. We do have authority over the federal courts, as you know. We can eliminate an entire district court. We have power funding over the courts and all these other things. But desperate times call for desperate measures, and Congress is going to act. So stay tuned for that.
Did you hear that?
We can eliminate an entire district court.
Are you bitch? It's the latest attack from Republicans on the federal judiciary.
They had what?
As courts have blocked a series of actions taken by Trump and his pervy little Boy Scouts. In addition to threatening to eliminate courts and judges they don't like, Trump and his junior castrados have called for the impeachment of federal judges who have ruled against him, most notably this guy, U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, who halted Trump from using the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelan migrants, except that Trump ignored him and did it anyway. But first, a couple things. Altar boy Mike Johnson, he's a weak little man. He obeys Trump because Trump will turn on him and call for his uneducated minions to pounce on Mikey should he say out loud what every legal mind is already thinking, and that is Congress's funding power doesn't extend to dissolving the courts you disagree with. That directly violates the separation of powers established by Article 3 of the Constitution.
I believe in hate speech. When you have hate for somebody, I am 100% into speech.
Now, I know everybody in MAGA doesn't get it, but look, courts are independent for a reason. Listen to this.
We're looking at all the alternatives that we have to address this problem. Activist judges are a serious threat to our system. It has increased in number. It has increased in intensity. If you look at the statistics that the White House shared, they looked at over the last 100 years, 67% of injunctions were issued against one president. His name is Donald J. Trump. And of those, I think the number was 92% of that number were by known partisan Democrat-appointed judges to the bench. This is not the way the system is supposed to work. So we're going to have hearings to highlight the abuses. I suspect that we may wind up questioning some of these judges themselves to have them defend their actions. And then we'll see about limiting the scope of federal injunctions. One judge should not be able to suspend and uphold everything that a president does on their agenda.
The activist they're talking about is this guy. And he's not some libtard, as Senator Kid Rock might say. No, this so-called activist is Judge Boasberg, the radical leftist judge, who should be impeached, according to Trump and his cabal of ass-kissing junior high diplomas.
It comes as President Trump escalates his feud with federal judge James Boasberg, calling Boasberg a constitutional disaster on social media. Boasberg has set a hearing for today to, quote, get to the bottom of whether the administration ignored his order to turn around flights bound for El Salvador carrying Venezuelan immigrants. The administration argues it deported the alleged gang members under the Wartime Alien Enemies Act, claiming the planes were already in international waters when Boasberg made his ruling. ABC's Jonathan Karl pressed border czar Tom Homan about his recent comments, in which Homan said he doesn't care about the judge's order.
I don't care what that judges think as far as this case. We're going to continue to arrest public safety threats and national security threats. We're going to continue to deport them to the United States.
But you're going to abide by court orders as long as, and go through your appeals process, but you are not going to defy those orders.
Attorney General Pam Bondi predicts the Supreme Court will need to get involved.
This is an out-of-control judge, a federal judge trying to control our entire foreign policy, and he cannot do it.
These people lie and lie and lie, because this activist judge, he's the same judge who ordered the release of 14,000 of Hillary Clinton's emails.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find emails that are missing.
The same judge who dismissed the Trump tax return lawsuit, ensuring his taxes don't become public. The same judge who upheld parts of a work requirement bill for Medicaid programs in Kentucky, meaning that old sick people in the bluegrass state have to work at a Taco Bell or they'll cut off their funding.
This is an out of control judge.
The same judge who limited the scope of the Mueller investigation disclosures and issued lighter sentences for J6 rioters than prosecutors were seeking. And Judge Boasberg limited grand jury material disclosures in Trump's classified documents case.
Now, I don't care what that judges think as far as this case.
The idea that this guy is some radical leftist ideologue is literally concocted out of thin air. He's about as liberal as Steve Bannon.
Let them call you racist. Let them call you xenophobe. Wear it as a badge of honor.
So there are two questions. One, can Congress really defund the courts and then shut them down? And if so, where do I sign up for the new People's Army? Because that's what we're talking about.
It's the enemy from within.
Look, any attempt to defund the courts will be a major deal in bipartisan funding negotiations for the next fiscal year. In other words, Johnson would need to convince powerful senior appropriators to strip funding for certain courts in their funding bill. But the Appropriations Subcommittee that oversees the funding bill is chaired by this guy, Representative Dave Joyce. He's a Republican from Ohio, a former prosecutor, a self-described pragmatist, and one of the more moderate members of the House GOP conference. And on top of that, House Republicans would need a near unanimous agreement to pass a defunding bill. It's a difficult feat given their narrow majority. And the Senate would almost certainly reject any funding bill or package that defunds the courts.
It's not what the founders intended.
Trump officials transmitting classified war plans on unsecured channels.
Listen, the administration, as I understand, I just was with the president in the Oval Office just now. The administration is addressing what happened. Apparently an inadvertent phone number made it onto that thread.
And that's where you have to ask yourself this. How dim-witted are Republican leaders to allow drunks like Pete Hegseth to text battle plans like a 12-year-old Valley girl?
There are 5 must-know rules when texting a girl. Keep your texts brief and to the point.
Under the previous administration, we looked like fools.
Or with measles raging across 30 states and the latest ominous reports of bird flu jumping to mammals, allow Kennedy access to anything more important than ordering a pizza.
There is zero evidence that the flu shot prevents any hospitalizations or any deaths. The flu shot transmits the flu.
What the hell did you just say? Because they're all cowards, and they've turned their backs on our country and our allies and our friends to instead support a sociopath who'll bring it all down to save his huge felonious ass.
We can eliminate an entire district court.
And if we allow that to happen, allow Senor Man-Titties to be the one to end our democracy, what does that say about us?
Goddamn right.
It's not fair.
They had what?
I think he's a kook. I think he's uninformed. Here's why I'm with Trump.
Well, don't you love me?
Bloated and fat and disgusting.
I like that.
We're a nation that speaks English.
Look, if something like that thing start goggling.
I don't want to talk about this stuff.
Am I wrong?
Yes.
Tick-tock.
You're in a lot of trouble, Donnie.
I think he's crazy.
I'm Chip Franklin.